The modern shark has no natural predator, not one. 400 million years of refinement, and the result is a hunter so complete that nothing in the ocean dares test it. That's what everyone believes. Here's what almost nobody knows. The very features that make a shark, the torpedo body, the lightweight cartilage skeleton, the burst of speed from a dead stop, none of them evolved for hunting. They evolved for running. Somewhere in the late Devonian, something was making sharks fast. Not fast enough to catch prey, fast enough to survive being prey. That something had no teeth built for speed. It didn't need them. It had a bite strong enough to end the conversation before it started. Its name was Dunkleosteus, and it's been extinct for 360 million years. We think of evolution as a slow, patient sculptor, refining a species over millions of years towards some kind of perfection. That's true, as far as it goes. But it leaves out the part that actually does the sculpting. Evolution doesn't refine a species because refinement is good. It refines a species because the alternative is death, repeated across enough generations that only one version of the animal is left standing. For the ancestors of every shark alive today, the sculptor had a name, a set of jaws, and an appetite that didn't discriminate by size. The late Devonian ocean would look almost unrecognizable to anyone standing on a beach today. No bony fish crowding the shallows in the numbers we're used to. No marine mammals, no seabirds circling overhead. Instead, a world still dominated by armored fish and early cartilaginous predators, competing for a food web that was, in evolutionary terms, still being written for the first time. Vertebrates with jaws were a relatively new invention. Nobody had settled yet on what the ocean's dominant body plan would look like, and for a long stretch of that period, the animal writing the rules wasn't a shark at all. Northern Ohio, a layer of dark shale along the banks of the Rocky River. To most people, it looks like nothing. Crumbling gray-black rock, the kind you'd walk past without a second glance, maybe skip across a creek if it broke into flat enough pieces. To paleontologists, it's one of the richest crime scenes in the history of life on Earth. They call it the Cleveland Shale, 360 million years old, laid down at the bottom of an ancient inland sea that once stretched across what is now the American Midwest. And it preserves something most fossil sites never do. Not just bones, but moments. Not just what an animal looked like, but what was happening to it in the final seconds before it died. In 1928, two men from the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, Peter Bungart and Jesse Earl Hyde, pulled a skull from that shale after years of searching the riverbanks. Armored, boxy, built like a bank vault with a hinge. It belonged to Dunkleosteus terrelli, the apex predator of the Devonian seas, a fish that didn't need teeth because its jawbones had sharpened themselves into blades with every single bite. Some estimates put the largest individuals at over 6 meters long, though the back half of the animal was cartilage and rarely survives fossilization, so nobody knows the true upper limit. But Dunkleosteus wasn't alone in that shale. Neither was it alone in that ocean, buried in the same layers, fin spines, ridged, serrated, unmistakably shark. They belonged to Ctenacanthus, a large chondrichthyon built from cartilage instead of bone that patrolled the same Devonian waters, hunting the same reefs and open water that Dunkleosteus called home. Recent analysis of Ctenacanthus cancinus teeth, recovered from Morocco and cross-referenced against the Cleveland material, put some Ctenacanths at sizes rivaling a modern great white shark. Not small, not defenseless. A real predator in its own right, with a bite capable of handling squid-like cephalopods, armored fish, and smaller sharks. And then there's the detail that changes everything. In that same rock, scientists found a smaller placoderm called Holdenius, a close relative of Dunkleosteus, built along the same armored blueprint, preserved beside its last meal. A ctenacanth, bitten clean in half, not scavenged, not decomposed, bitten. The kind of preservation that only happens when death comes fast, and burial comes faster, when the sediment closes over a body before scavengers or decay can erase the evidence of exactly how it died. This isn't a theory stitched together from fragments or an artist's guess dressed up as science. It's physical evidence, sitting in a drawer in a museum in Cleveland, Ohio, an armored killer and a shark that didn't get away. Now ask the obvious question. If Ctenacanthus was big enough to be an apex predator, if it had teeth built for tearing and a body built for hunting, why does it turn up in the fossil record on the losing end of a bite? The answer is in what it didn't have. Dunkleosteus wore armor across its head and shoulders, thick bone plates that didn't just protect it, but sharpened themselves with every bite, grinding against each other like a self-honing blade that never needed replacing. Its bite force has been estimated at around 7,000 newtons at the tip of the jaw. That's one of the strongest bites of any fish that has ever lived, living or extinct, rivaling estimates for some of the largest sharks in history. Its jaw could snap open in as little as 20 milliseconds, faster than a human eye can register the motion, and that speed created suction powerful enough to pull prey directly into its mouth from a short distance away. You didn't have to be careless to end up inside it. You just had to be close and slightly too slow. Ctenacanthus had none of that. No armor plating across the skull, no bone shield over the vital organs. Its entire skeleton, like every shark before and since, was cartilage, light, flexible, and completely undefended against a bite that could shear through solid bone without slowing down. What it had instead was a choice most predators never have to make: get faster or get eaten. There was no armor upgrade available, no thicker scales to grow. The only lever left to pull was speed, and evolution pulled it as hard as it could, one generation at a time. So evolution built a body around that single constraint. A streamlined shape that cut through water instead of pushing it aside, cutting drag with every meter traveled. A skeleton made of cartilage instead of bone, not because cartilage is weaker, but because it's a fraction of the weight, and weight is the one thing you cannot afford when your survival depends on how fast you can turn in open water with nowhere to hide. Along its back, sharp dorsal spines, not tools for hunting, but a last line of defense, something that made swallowing it a genuinely bad idea even for a jaw that size, a small tax paid by anything that tried to finish the job. Modern fighter jet designers work from the exact same logic. Strip away armor plating, cut every gram of unnecessary weight, trade protection for maneuverability, because in a fight decided by speed and reaction time, heavy is dead before the first shot is fired. Devonian sharks arrived at that engineering principle almost 400 million years before the first aircraft ever left the ground. Not through intelligence, not through planning, through elimination, generation after generation, in a process with no name and no mercy. The slow ones simply didn't leave descendants. Every shark alive today is still built on that same blueprint, whether it's a 2-meter reef shark or a 6-meter great white. The torpedo body, the lightweight cartilage frame, the instant acceleration from a standing start that lets a shark cover its own body length in a fraction of a second. We call these hunting adaptations now the tools of an apex predator. They didn't start that way. They started as an answer to a single question, asked over and over by an ocean full of teeth. How do you not become the meal? Here's the part that rarely makes it into the story. Ctenacanthus wasn't only running. Recent studies of its teeth, analyzing the microscopic wear patterns, the scratches, the pitting left behind by a lifetime of feeding, suggest it was an opportunistic hunter, taking cephalopods and other prey whenever the chance came, adapting its diet to whatever the Devonian seas offered. Some of the evidence even points to it feeding on other cartilaginous fish, smaller sharks. Quite possibly its own relatives, in a world where being related to something didn't make you safe from it, which means Ctenacanthus was living two lives at once and switching between them without warning. Predator in the middle of the water column, chasing down anything smaller and slower than itself, using exactly the same speed and agility it needed for the other half of its existence. Prey the moment something larger and armored appeared out of the murk, with no warning beyond a shadow and a pressure wave moving faster than it should. There was no version of that ocean where you got to relax. You could be hunting one moment and hunted the next, and the transition between those two states could happen in the space of one bad decision, the wrong direction, the wrong depth, the wrong distance from the nearest cover. A creature that size, with a bite that fast, didn't announce itself from far away. By the time you saw it, the decision that mattered had already been made 30 seconds earlier. Picture what a single day actually required. Locate prey smaller and slower than yourself, close the distance without alerting it, commit to the strike, and do all of that while some part of your senses stayed tuned to the water behind you, watching for exactly the kind of shadow that meant the roles had just reversed. No modern shark lives with that particular arithmetic. A great white today can feed at leisure, because nothing in its ocean is calculating whether today is the day it becomes someone else's meal. Ctenacanthus never got that luxury, not for one generation in millions of years. That is the kind of pressure that doesn't just kill the unlucky individuals. It reshapes an entire lineage from the inside out. Every generation that survived was a little faster, a little lighter, a little quicker off the mark than the one before it, purely because the slightly slower ones were removed from the gene pool one bite at a time. Not because any of them were trying to become something new or evolving towards some distant goal. Because the alternative, every single day, was a set of jaws that opened in 20 milliseconds and rarely missed twice. It's worth sitting with how long this went on. Not a season, not a single generation of sharks learning a hard lesson and passing it on. Millions of years, layer after layer of Cleveland Shale, each one representing time during which this exact pressure never let up. Dunkleosteus didn't appear once and vanish. It was a fixture of that ecosystem for the entire span in which Ctenacanthus and its relatives were refining the shark body plan into something recognizable. Two lineages, locked together, one applying pressure and one absorbing it, for longer than the entire history of mammals that would come afterward. And Ctenacanthus wasn't the only shark caught in that pressure. The same shale that preserves Dunkleosteus and its armored relatives also preserves Cleveland, a smaller, sleeker shark built along a similar theme. Narrow body, crescent tail, built for a quick burst rather than a long chase. And Ctenacanthus, an even stranger design, carrying a flat, brush-like structure on its back whose exact purpose still isn't settled. Three very different sharks, three different solutions, all of them tested in the same water at the same time against the same set of jaws. Some of that variation survived into later oceans, some of it didn't, but all of it was shaped by the same predator, pushing in the same direction, whether the shark in question was built for a chase or built for a single desperate sprint. This is easy to miss if you only picture the ocean as Dunkleosteus, and one shark facing off, like a heavyweight bout with a single challenger. It wasn't that. It was an entire ecosystem running the same experiment in dozens of variations at once, with one predator setting the terms and every other lineage in that sea negotiating its survival against those terms in its own way. Most of those experiments left no direct descendants. The ones that did all shared the same handful of features: light skeletons, streamlined bodies, sudden acceleration. Not because sharks converged on an ideal by chance, but because anything that didn't converge on it stopped appearing in the fossil record. Then, roughly 360 million years ago, the pressure stopped all at once for reasons that had nothing to do with speed or armor. A series of mass extinction events at the end of the Devonian, climate shifts, dropping oxygen levels in the oceans, a chain of environmental collapses that paleontologists are still working to fully untangle, wiped out an enormous share of life in the seas. Dunkleosteus and the other giant placoderms went with it. So did most of the other giant armored fish that had ruled alongside them. The bank vault design that had made Dunkleosteus untouchable for millions of years turned out to have no answer for a world where the water chemistry itself was turning hostile. Armor doesn't help when the problem isn't a set of jaws. Sharks, as a group, came through that extinction in far better shape than the placoderms did. Not because they were tougher in a fight, because a body built for speed and flexibility, tuned by millions of years of narrowly surviving Dunkleosteus, turned out to be adaptable in ways a heavily armored body could never be. Lighter animals need less to survive. Faster animals can range further to find it. The same traits that had been forced into existence by one specific predator turned out to be exactly what was needed to outlast a global catastrophe that predator never saw coming. Go to almost any coastline on Earth today, and there's a shark somewhere beyond the waves, closer than most people realize. Streamlined, fast, built from cartilage light enough to turn on an instant, chasing something smaller through open water exactly the way its ancestors did. It has no reason to be afraid of anything in that water. Nothing has been fast enough, or armored enough, or dangerous enough to seriously threaten an adult shark in tens of millions of years. As far as the modern ocean is concerned, the shark is the final word. But the body carrying it through the water was not designed for a world without fear. It was designed for one very specific predator, in one specific sea, 370 million years ago, a predator that has been gone for 360 million years, and left no descendants of its own to carry that armor forward into the present. Dunkleosteus is extinct, completely. It has no living relatives, no modern legacy, nothing swimming in any ocean today that carries even a trace of its armor plating or its self-sharpening jaw. And yet every time a shark accelerates from a standing start, every time it turns its whole body in a space barely larger than itself, it is still running from something that no longer exists anywhere except in a drawer of dark shale in Cleveland, Ohio. The predator is gone. The fear it built still swims,